These are difficult times, and any suggestion that people who broke into this Capitol, injured law enforcement, stopped the orderly progress of what we do as members, warrants everyone being pardoned, is undemocratic.
165 have pleaded guilty to criminal behavior. My view is I would not be in favor of shortening any of the sentences for any of the people who pleaded guilty to crimes.
Hi again, everyone. It's 5 o'clock in New York. So how bad were Donald Trump's comments this weekend that he would pardon all of the people charged in the Capitol insurrection? They were so bad that we heard the same reaction to the comments from the Democratic chairman of the 1-6 Select Committee and the Republican leader in the U.S. Senate. Even Trump's bestie, Lindsey Graham, said pardons for the insurrectionists are inappropriate. So then Trump fired back last night, calling Graham a rhino for his remarks, saying he doesn't know what he's talking about. But back to the problem of those pardons. Issuing them to the hundreds who attacked our democracy, ravaged the Capitol, brutalized law enforcement officers, and called for the death of the American vice president by hanging is definitely inappropriate and undemocratic, and as has been said. But it's also potentially criminal. Here's 1-6 committee member Congressman Pete Aguilar earlier today.
Is Trump tampering with witnesses when he's talking about pardons, when he's dangling them in front of 1-6 defendants?
Absolutely. And I think the question is more for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, you know, where are they? Do they support this? When is enough enough? When a mob is chanting, hang Mike Pence, it wasn't enough. When the former president asked Brad Raffensperger to find him 11,000 votes, it wasn't enough. Now he's, you know, dangling pardons if he gets back in office for individuals. Will that be enough, or will there be more collective amnesia? You know, I just don't know where the floor is these days on that side of the aisle.
There isn't one. Republicans exhibiting quite a high tolerance for the ex-president's conduct. We don't have to look further than the last few days. In addition to floating pardons, Trump admitted the whole time he just wanted the vice president to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Trump called for, quote, the biggest protest we've ever had in places where he is being investigated personally and criminally. And reporting this week has exposed his direct involvement in attempts to seize voting machines after the election. All of these showing the depth of Trump's desperation and the damage he has wrought on this country and its founding principles. From the New York Times in some brand new analysis, quote, historians say the episodes in Trump's new comments acknowledging his determination to stay in power and his effective embrace of the January 6 rioters at the Capitol, who he said must be treated fairly, have newly underscored the fragility of the nation's democratic systems. Jeffrey Engel, director of the Center for Presidential History at SMU, said voters were understandably desensitized, if not numb, after a year in which Trump methodically sought to undermine faith in the electoral process. Quote, I actually think the American public is dramatically underplaying how significant and dangerous this is, he said, because we cannot process the basic truth of what we are learning about Trump's efforts, which is we've never had a president before who fundamentally placed his own personal interests above the nation's. What to do about an ex-president who still wields political power but places himself ahead of the country he once led? It's where we start this hour with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. John Heilman is back. He's the executive editor of The Recount, the host of the Hell and High Water podcast. Also joining us, Kim Atkins-Storrs, senior opinion columnist for the Boston Globe. And Jason Johnson is back, politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University, all three MSNBC contributors. Hi there, John Heilman. What do you make of it's only Wednesday. It feels like dog years, right? 7 days have been had each one of the news cycles we've already lived through. But what do you make of the newly sort of corroborated and confirmed picture of not just Trump's hands on the effort to seize voting machines, but his direction of those plots at DOD, DHS, and DOJ?
Hi, Nicole. It's not just it's only Wednesday. It's like, what is it, February 2nd? February 2nd, right?
Yeah.
I mean, man, whew.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
you
me
know,
too.
it's just like it's early in the year, and we've had enough traitorous and treasonous activity revealed over the last 1 month and a couple days to last a lifetime, let alone a year. You know, there's a lot of ways to parse all of this, and I'm, you know, you and I feel like I've talked endlessly about this, and I'll make somebody laugh if they say that I try not to be, I try to say what I think is true, and also try not to be totally hyperbolic, right? Like, I don't think I've used the word treason before about Donald Trump. Someone will figure out if I have at some point in the course of his presidency and up till now. And many people would say I should have a long time ago. But I just don't really understand how the totality of the picture that we now have doesn't amount to textbook definitions of what treason is. I mean, I think the picture has been, in some sense, the picture has been clear for a long time, but the extent of it, of the knowledge, the foreknowledge, the direction, the systematic nature of what Donald Trump tried to do. I mean, treason in the Constitution, you know, talks about levying war against these United States, adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. Most people understand it as the attempt to overthrow a legitimate government. Now, it's true that Donald Trump, in the context of this, when January 6th happened, he was still president of the United States, and yet, you know, trying to overthrow a legitimate democratic process that the incoming president, who's been validated as the legal occupant, next occupant of the Oval Office, is the equivalent of that. And so, if you think about what he did, and then what he's been saying about it, and the clear intent, it's not enough to really talk about how he's kind of aided and abetted insurrection or incited a riot. It is the case that he attempted to commit treason. He was engaged in treasonous activities against the United States last year, a year and a half ago, and he has every intent of doing it again. It's just there's no other way to understand this other than witness tampering seems like to me to be the least of it. He's basically saying to people, I think that what we did, we tried to overthrow the government. That's what we were trying to do. The people who tried to do it are heroes, not criminals. I will pardon them if I get reelected. And for anybody who's contemplating doing this again in a similar circumstance, I applaud you. And you will face, at least if I'm president, or what's left of the presidency, if Donald Trump were to become the chief executive of the United States again, I'm not sure we'd call that president anymore. We'd call it something else, uglier. He's saying you will not be punished. You will be commended. You will be valorized. And I think I can't think of words that are harsh enough to explain it or clearer than they are right now. And I agree with that historian at the New York Times. I think people are just, it's so monstrous that people are still, many people, millions and millions of people in the country have not processed it, how naked and dangerous it is, and how just utterly horrifying and so far outside any precedent that we've seen in any president of any party in the history of the country that people just can't compute. We're all sort of on tilt. I mean, some of us are not, but many people are just, it just doesn't, they can't make it make sense in their heads. And I think that's why the country is in such a state of peril, because there's so many people who just haven't been able to just apprehend this very basic set of facts, even as Donald Trump tries every day to make it clearer to all of us what he tried to do and what he will do in the future.
Well, and we're going to have a different conversation, but let's have this one instead, because I think that the asymmetry of Trump has always been his greatest asset. You know, a campaign is set up to fact-check someone. In the Republican primaries in 2015, the Jeb Bush campaign was ready to say, ha-ha, but you weren't for that tax policy. And Trump just went, you big fat, what do you call him? You know, tired Jeb Bush, you know, lying Ted Cruz.
Low energy Jeb.
Low energy.
Yes. People bring pistols, and he brings a bazooka. And so he's always shot people, opponents in the political arena out of the sky with, as you said, a more monstrous attack, a bigger, you know, sort of arsenal that would not just defeat the enemy in front of him, but overpower everything else. And I think that what's so uncomfortable is that institutions, news organizations grapple with whether to call what he was saying lies, right? So while we're trying to figure out if it's a misstatement, a mistruth, you know, doublespeak or inconsistent, he's just lying his way to seal up his base to not believe anybody but him. And this asymmetry continues. And I think what you described, John Heilman, is that he's now conditioned his base to not believe in elections. Elections now do not matter. And that's where Liz Cheney seems to be drawing a line and bringing out an equally large arsenal by being the first person to say he's going to get away with nothing, not potential violations of the Presidential Records Act, not potential witness tampering, not potential efforts to overthrow an election. She's going for the whole package of sins, which no one's ever done. People have said, oh, well, he obstructed justice, but, you know, we got this law on the books at DOJ that says we can't indict. Liz Cheney's saying, F the laws. We're going to hold this buffoon, this dangerous buffoon, accountable once and for all. Can she succeed, John Heilman?
Man, it's a $64 million question, Nicole, and I will just amend this one comment. What's so crazy about this moment with Trump right now is it's almost like, I mean, a guy who's a pathological liar who's lied more than anybody else in the history of lying fat liars. He's the biggest liar in the history of the world, right? But he's not lying anymore. You know, it's like he's coming out and now just telling the truth. Yes, I wanted Mike Pence to overthrow the election. Yes, I wanted Mike Pence to overthrow the election, and all of you people who tried to do that, I'm on your side. And if you try to do it again, first of all, if I get reelected, if I get elected again, I will free you. I will pardon you. And then if I get elected, there will be no punishment for anybody who helps me get elected in this nefarious way. He's just now, actually, for the first time ever in his life, just speaking for what is his plain truth. He's not even trying to obscure it with lies anymore. And whether Liz Cheney and the rest of them, you know, that's why I don't. It's obviously witness tampering. I'm not a lawyer, but like he's obviously tampering with witnesses. But it seems like a petty crime compared to what is really being exposed here and laid bare for everyone here. And I do think, you know, we are going to see when we get to this moment sometime in the late winter, early spring, when the committee decides it's the moment now where we're going to go and take this case to the country. And we're going to stand up maybe on primetime in television. We're going to have our hearings. And we're going to stitch this story together. We will learn not just about whether Liz Cheney or any of those people, any of our elected leaders, as they all pull together around this committee, at least on one side of the aisle, whether they're capable of it. We'll also learn whether we're capable of seeing it. And I think that's the deeper thing. It's to some extent a question about their capacity, but it's a bigger question about our capacity as a country to grapple with reality.
Yeah, and you know, Kim, the parallels to Watergate are I mean, Watergate's so quaint now compared to an out-of-the-closet wannabe dictator. Trump wasn't wanting to be a dictator behind closed doors. He was wanting it in public on his Twitter feed and on the rally stage. If Mike Pence will just do the right thing and overturn the results of the election I lost. I wonder if you can just pick up on the question before the country. It won't be whether we can sort of pay attention long enough. It'll be whether or not we care. We care about living in a democracy. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think one of the biggest, and I think you're right, I think the degree of Watergate is so much less than where we are right now. But I think a big difference is Watergate had a political backstop, whereas people in the president's own party said, it's over, you lost. And that is why he stepped down before he could even be impeached. That isn't happening here. You have a Republican Party that is completely abetting the former president in the destruction of democratic systems, almost unanimously with the few exceptions of people like Liz Cheney. So that's a big, crucial difference. I want to just make a point as to what John was saying, and I totally understand and appreciate the point he was making about treason and whether or not this committee really has the ability to hold this former president accountable. We left out another institution, which is federal and state prosecutors who have the job of proving these crimes if they were committed. According to the courts, when it comes to treason, that's really something that's only charged during wartime. But what the president could be charged with is insurrection. And the importance of that potential charge, if he could be proven to have it, is one of the penalties is that you cannot hold federal office if you are convicted of it. And that is an important democratic backstop to stop the precise dangers that we're talking about if the president is again reelected. I share your thought, Nicole, that that if a reelection of Donald Trump could mean the end of democracy, because it instantly no longer becomes a presidency and it becomes something far, far worse. There are a lot of other things: obstruction of justice, witness tampering. The Presidential Records Act is minor. Violating that carries a top penalty of 3 years in prison and some fines. There are much, much more things that have happened. And I really do hope that the DOJ is paying close attention to it, is investigating all of this thoroughly. We've talked about with my sisters-in-law on our podcast the difficulty of proving intent. Well, the president has now taken to admitting to things. So I think the difficulty of proving intent is a lot easier now. But that's where I'm looking now. Yes, the important work of this committee is crucial to preserving the record for history. But it is up to people like Merrick Garland. It is up to people like prosecutors in New York and Georgia, where these attempts to overthrow, the biggest attempt to overthrow, the clearest attempt to overthrow this election took place, to really come out with the truth and be able to make the elements of these crimes and really have some accountability that can protect the American people.
And just to bring it back, Jason Johnson, to protecting the American people, if they want to be protected from autocracy, you have to not want the thing that the autocratic side is selling. And I think some of what John's talking about is this fear of sounding hyperbolic only happens in the center and on the left. There is no fear of sounding hyperbolic on the right. And the right has been successful in conditioning their base for this outrageous behavior from Trump because they've been so hyperbolic about the rest of us. Right? The attacks on the media as enemies of the people, they only worked because they conditioned the Trump base to not believe anything you hear on the news. I mean, I think this fear of sort of hyperbole and being too scary has limited the truth tellers.
I agree, Nicole. And one of the things, like I'm teaching a media literacy class to my students now at Morgan State University. The level of cynicism that young people have towards the media, and then you mix that with old folks or older folks who've decided that there's only one place they want to listen to, it's hard for anyone to be an arbiter of truth, justice, and common sense at this particular point. That's one of the reasons why I have concerns as to whether or not the January 6th committee can be effective in presenting their case to the American public, because we know that there are 30-something% of the population that doesn't care. They don't care what the facts are. They just want Donald Trump in office. At this point, I don't care if he's found guilty of treason, if he's found guilty for violating records. I don't care if they find that he has a blockbuster VHS tape from 1998 that he's never returned and owes $100 million and has to go to jail. I don't care. The fact of the matter is the guy has been so obvious about being a direct danger to American democracy that he has to be jailed. He has to be punished. So the arguments that we have about how we go about doing it is one of the reasons why the defenders of democracy may end up failing, because while they're trying to dot the I's and cross the T's, you've got another organization, because they are no longer a party, making sure that the T's and I's don't matter because they control the alphabet and they control the count in every state.
It's such a good point, John Heilman. Thank you for turning this entire conversation in a much better, truthier direction. Kimberly Atkins-Dorr, John Heilman, thank you for starting us off.
I'm sorry.
No,
I just, what
do we need notes for, right? To rip up this group cut a day. Thank you, my friend.
I'm perturbed. I'm perturbed.
It's good. This is the place for it, right? We'll work it out. We are all perturbed.